Every pioneer who crossed the open country carried the same problem. A magnetic compass needle doesn't actually point to the top of the map. It points to the magnetic pole, which sits hundreds of miles away from the real one, and it drifts a little further every year. So the settlers who owned no compass at all weren't the ones walking in circles. What nobody fully understood back then was that the families reading the night sky were finding a truer north than the needle ever could. So how did families with no instrument at all stay more accurate than the instrument itself? The answer starts with a strange fact about the compass everyone trusted. A compass needle lines up with the Earth's magnetic field, and that field pulls toward the magnetic pole rather than the geographic one. The gap between those 2 points is called declination, and depending on where a wagon sat on the continent, that gap could throw a traveler off by 10 or even 20 degrees. Over a single day of walking, 20 degrees of error becomes miles of drift. Worse still, the magnetic pole wanders. It creeps across the far north year after year, so the same compass that pointed one way for a grandfather pointed slightly differently for his grandson. Mapmakers knew it too, which is why the better charts of the age printed a small correction in the corner, telling a reader how far the local needle strayed from true north. A compass was a fine tool for holding a line once someone knew its error, yet the error itself shifted from one valley to the next. And the country these families crossed gave them almost nothing to steer by. The open plains rolled out flat and nearly identical in every direction, and the deep timber closed in until one stand of trees looked like the last. With no coastline and no peak to fix on, the one dependable landmark left was the sky. The frontier families who leaned on it instead of the needle were leaning on something that barely moved at all. The oldest and steadiest tool the settlers had was a single point of light in the northern sky. We call it Polaris, the North Star, and it holds a place almost no other star can claim. Every star in the night appears to wheel in slow circles as the Earth turns beneath it. Polaris barely moves. It sits less than 1 degree from the exact point that marks true geographic north, so through an entire night it stays nearly frozen in place while the rest of the sky spins around it. That pole star has drifted into its spot slowly across thousands of years, and all through the age of the wagon trains it sat close enough to true north to trust without a second thought. A traveler who found that star and faced it directly was facing true north. That was true geographic north, the same north the maps were drawn around. The trick the pioneers passed down was how to find that one star among thousands. The answer lived inside the most recognizable shape in the northern sky, the 7 bright stars of the Big Dipper. The 2 stars that form the outer edge of the Dipper's cup are known as the pointer stars, and they earn that name honestly. A line drawn straight up from those 2 stars, stretched to about 5 times the distance between them, lands almost exactly on Polaris every single time. The Dipper swings around through the seasons, hanging high on some nights and low on others. Yet those 2 pointer stars keep aiming at the North Star, no matter where the bowl has turned. A settler who learned that one relationship carried a compass in memory that never needed winding and never drifted. Those same circling stars handed the settlers something extra once the pointer trick was learned. The whole northern sky turns around Polaris across the night like the single hand of a great clock, sweeping a full circle between one dusk and the next. The stars closest to the pole never dipped below the horizon at all, so they stayed on watch through every hour of darkness. A family that read the tilt of the Dipper could judge roughly how much of the night had slipped by while they held their heading north. There's a second gift hidden in that same star. The height of Polaris above the horizon matches a traveler's latitude almost exactly. Stood on the far southern deserts, the star rode low, close to the treetops, while a family pushing toward the northern forests watched it climb higher every week. Carried all the way to the top of the world, it would sit straight overhead, and back at the equator, it would rest flat on the horizon. So the same light that pointed the way home also whispered how far north a family had already come. One star did the work of both a compass and a map. But there's a detail in all of this that most travelers only learned the hard way. The pole star solved half the problem, because for close to half of every day, it simply wasn't in the sky. When the sun rose and the stars faded, the settlers lost their fixed marker and had to read a moving one instead. The sun travels, so it can't be trusted the way the pole star can. Yet the frontier families found a way to pin down true north using nothing but sunlight and the shadow of a stick pressed into the ground. The cleanest version worked at midday. As the sun climbs toward its highest point, shadows shrink, and at the exact middle of the day in the northern half of the world, the sun sits due south. That means the shadow it casts at that moment points straight north, and it's the shortest shadow the stick will throw all day. A traveler only had to watch a shadow shrink to its smallest length and mark where its tip lay. That line ran true north, drawn by the sun itself. The second version worked at any hour with sun in the sky, and it carried a rule so reliable it holds true everywhere on Earth. A settler would push a straight stick into level ground and mark the very tip of its shadow with a stone. That first mark always falls to the west. After waiting perhaps 10 or 15 minutes, the shadow tip crawled to a new spot, and a second stone marked it. That second mark always falls to the east. A straight line joining the two stones gave an east and west line, and the direction square across it pointed north and south. With the first stone on the left and the second on the right, a traveler stood facing north. A more patient traveler could sharpen that line into something close to exact. Marking the tip of the morning shadow and then scribing a curve in the dirt at that same distance from the stick, a settler could wait as the shadow shrank toward noon and stretched back out through the afternoon. The moment the shadow tip touched that curve again, a line drawn between the two touch points gave a true east and west line, cleaner than the quick version could ever manage. This shadow method never claimed the precision of the pole star. On most days, it lands a traveler within 10 or 15 degrees of true east and west, which is rough. But rough was often enough. 10 or 15 degrees of accuracy keeps a person from the deadliest mistake in open country, which is wandering in a slow circle back to where they started. The shadow gave a settler a heading to hold, and holding any steady heading beats drifting with none. There was one more daytime trick, and it belonged to any traveler carrying a pocket watch, which plenty of them did. Held flat with the hour hand aimed at the sun, an old analog watch turns into a rough compass. The point halfway between the hour hand and the mark at the top of the dial pointed south in the northern half of the world, which meant the opposite direction pointed north. It leaned on the same truth as the shadow stick, that the sun keeps a steady schedule across the sky, and it gave a wandering family one more way to check themselves against the land. If these frontier skills are pulling you in, this is a good moment to subscribe, because this channel digs into the lost know-how of the pioneers every week. Now back to the sky and to the trap that swallowed the travelers who trusted the wrong signs. While the pole star and the shadow stick did the honest work, the settlers also carried a handful of shortcuts that felt like wisdom and failed in the field. The most famous shortcut of all had to do with the sunrise. Almost everyone grows up hearing that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and settlers heard the same. That saying holds true on only 2 days out of the whole year. Around the third week of March, and again near the end of September, the sun rises due east and sets due west. And those 2 dates are the equinoxes, when day and night run nearly equal. Every other day of the year, the sunrise slides off the mark. Through the summer, the sun climbs up out of the northeast, and through the winter, it breaks the horizon well to the southeast. The sun's whole arc drifts with the seasons on top of that, riding high across the southern sky in the warm months and sagging low toward the horizon in the cold ones, which nudges the exact spots where it clears the ground at dawn and drops away at dusk. A pioneer who fixed a whole day's travel on the belief that the dawn sat due east could march off course by a wide margin before noon. The ones who survived knew the sunrise as a loose hint and saved their trust for the shadow at midday and the star at night. The forest offered its own famous shortcut, and it's the one that still gets repeated today. The idea says moss grows on the north side of a tree, so the green face of the bark should point the way north. Frontier families passed that belief down like a family heirloom, and it let plenty of them down. Moss answers to shade and moisture, and nothing else. It spreads on whatever face of a tree stays dampest and coolest. In a thick forest where the canopy shades every side, moss wraps clean around the whole trunk. In the wettest country, where fog and rain soak everything, it climbs across bark and stone and fallen logs on every side without a care for the sun, and even the slope of the ground can tip it one way over another. Near a stream or on a shaded bank, it grows toward the water, whatever compass direction that happens to be. A traveler who bet a day's march on a patch of green could just as easily have been marching south. The pioneers who made it home treated the moss as a guess and treated the sky as the answer. Put those skills side by side, and a pattern shows up. The signs that pointed true were the ones tied to the turning of the earth itself, the fixed star overhead, and the steady march of the sun. The signs that failed were the local ones, the moss and the bark, and the lay of a single hillside, because those answer to 1,000 small accidents of weather and terrain. The sharpest travelers rarely trusted a single sign on its own. They lined the noon shadow up against the evening star and let the two great clocks of the sky, the sun by day and the pole star by night, hold each other honest. The settlers who crossed a continent on foot and by wagon learned to tell the difference, and that judgment was the real skill, deeper than any single trick. There was a deeper reason the settlers cared about true north rather than the magnetic kind. When the time came to mark out a claim and carve the land into square parcels, the boundary lines had to follow real geographic north, or every fence would lean off true, and neighbors would end up fighting over the gaps. The surveyors who laid out those grids fixed their lines by watching the pole star, the one reference that would still sit in the same place 100 years later when the old deeds were pulled back out. Which brings the whole story back to that compass in the pioneer's pocket. The needle felt like certainty because it was made of metal and it moved on its own. Yet it answered to a magnetic pole that sat far from true north and wandered a little more each year. The star answered to nothing but the axis of the planet. A family standing in the dark with no instrument at all, tracing two pointer stars up to a single fixed light, was reading the most honest compass ever built. It had simply been hanging over their heads the entire time. The next time the night sky is clear and the city lights fall away, the same star that guided 1,000 wagons is still sitting exactly where it always has, waiting for anyone who remembers how to read it. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like and subscribe. And if you'd like to continue watching more of my videos on frontier and pioneer skills, you can click the video on the screen now.